Hello and welcome back to my 10,000 favorite people. Hope you're doing well. I'm incredibly excited for today's video, not only because I finally made a Twitter account where I can share updates and we can have discussions a lot more often than I can here on YouTube, but also because of some of the amazing developments we've had this week, like MicroStrategy announcing they bought another $800 million worth of Bitcoin, or the SEC dropping their Ethereum investigation as to whether or not Ethereum is a security, and stablecoin issuers becoming the 18th largest holder in the world of US debt. And even with all of these amazing developments and with Bitcoin still holding above 64,000, you would think based on current sentiment on Twitter and YouTube that Bitcoin had already plummeted to 50K. And I know where a lot of this is coming from. Many traders tried aggressively trading this range over the past 3 months with leverage and lost a lot of money even while price has remained flat. And then also we've seen significant underperformance from altcoins while Bitcoin has gone sideways. And of course, the majority of retail participants have an altcoin heavy portfolio, so they have watched their portfolio bleed even as Bitcoin has traded sideways in a tight range. And I have made it very clear that my base case is still a normal cycle for Bitcoin, where we're going to enter a prolonged chop and consolidation period after the incredible move we saw in 2023 and early 2024. But the reason I have kept this left translated cycle outcome on the chart is, in my opinion, there's still a chance it occurs, and perhaps the catalyst for that will be the run-up going into the launch of the Ethereum spot ETFs and what kind of inflows we may see for those ETFs when they go live. And this is why, although I'm expecting a lot of chop for Bitcoin and potential downside, my portfolio still remains relatively long, with 80% of it being in assets and only roughly 20% being cash. And of course, relative to a market cap weighting, my Ethereum position is relatively large. And although I know it's way more popular on social media to go all in on the moon outcome or all in on the macro doomer outcome and say prices have to go down, I have found the most success in this market by setting up my portfolio in a way where I don't have a liquidation price because of leverage, and I don't have risky projects that might disappear because I want to go high risk, high reward. I have found the most success by holding assets I believe in the medium to long term, that have all of these amazing catalysts and all of this buying demand coming from MicroStrategy or from these passive ETF buyers, because it allows me to hold through volatility and not lose a bunch of money along the way, no matter which of these three outcomes we end up seeing. And looking at Bitcoin's price action, we're still nicely holding that 20-week moving average. Of course, a weekly close below that level will be the first warning sign, because we haven't seen that since August 2023. It held back in late April. It's holding once again. So of course, we're going to monitor that going forward. And normally when MicroStrategy comes out and announces they bought $800 million worth of Bitcoin while prices still went down, that's normally not a great sign. Of course, longer term, more and more Bitcoin being locked up in MicroStrategy's holdings is a good thing. In the short term, we could see a little more downside because even that buy pressure could not keep us afloat. But again, in the long term, still great to see. Something else that keeps me quite bullish in the medium term is the strength we've seen from the S&P 500. We know these assets tend to be quite correlated, and Bitcoin needs a bullish S&P 500 if it's going to go up, because it is further out on the risk curve. And if we look at what the S&P 500 has been doing, it has still been grinding higher week after week. And of course, there will be some volatility, perhaps especially as we get closer to the elections. But right now, we're not seeing any major warning signs from the S&P 500 that would make me a lot more concerned that maybe this failed cycle scenario is going to play out. Both the left translated cycle and normal cycle for Bitcoin require a bullish S&P 500, which of course is what we've seen so far. As for our favorite inverse correlation with Bitcoin, the dollar index has slowly been working its way higher day after day, but I don't think there's a lot of reason to be concerned until we break out above that previous high of 106. Right now, we're still waiting to see what's actually going to happen. Of course, the mania phases for Bitcoin, where everybody makes a bunch of money, require the dollar to be devalued aggressively. And although I don't see that happening in the short term, I do think we see it sometime within the next 12 months, but we will still monitor this uptrend we've seen on the dollar index. This still looks like quite bullish structure in my opinion, and looks like it could break higher. But of course, the dollar index is very volatile and relies very heavily on what the market is expecting the Fed to do. Current expectation is still a rate cut in September, but of course, these predictions will continue to change as we get more and more data, which is why we continue to monitor the labor market and continue to monitor inflation. But as of right now, consensus is the first rate cut will happen in September. But of course, that is still 3 months away. So a lot can happen between now and then. And in the meantime, for me at least, I'm going to keep a lot of my focus on what Ethereum is doing going into this ETF deadline and seeing if it can perhaps bring some resurgence back into the altcoin market as we perhaps see a buy the rumor, sell the news event for Ethereum going into the launch of those Ethereum spot ETFs. It's also incredibly bullish in the long term that the SEC is dropping this Ethereum investigation. A lot of people were concerned that Ethereum would be considered a security when it switched from a proof of work model to a proof of stake model. But with it being proof of stake and the SEC still dropping this investigation as to whether or not it's a security, I find that incredibly bullish for other proof of stake assets like Solana as well. It's going to be very hard for them to argue that Solana is a security if Ethereum isn't one. And with all of the demand and excitement we're seeing surrounding stablecoins, this is one of the main product market fits for this asset class because the US government needs treasury buyers with all of the debt that they have been issuing. And if stablecoin demand around the world allows more US government debt to be bought, that's very good for the US government, and it makes them a lot less likely to ban stablecoins, in my opinion, because there's a lot of people around the world that want to hold dollars but can't because they don't have access to a bank account that they can hold dollars in. But stablecoins give them that option while also providing demand for US government debt as well. As for Bitcoin dominance, still in this range. I think the next big move in this market will occur once we get Bitcoin dominance above 56%. Or below 54%. For now, as long as we continue chopping around in this range, I don't expect too much to happen in the market, which is why I remain relatively conservative with my portfolio. But of course, when it comes to the longer term, as long as the US government continues to run these huge deficits, we're already at 1.2 trillion with 4 months left to go in this fiscal year. That's why I'm still incredibly bullish on Bitcoin in the long term, just like I am on the S&P 500, especially looking at its track record over the past 100 years, because this government debt issuance and currency devaluation is a one-way street in my opinion. So no matter which one of these cycles we end up having, I'm still incredibly bullish in the long term. And that's why my portfolio reflects that more aggressively long but still conservative. But anyway, let me know what you expect. Is it going to be a normal cycle, a left translated cycle, or a failed cycle? Thank you so much for 10,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for all the support on the recent videos, and I'll talk to you soon.